Welcome, I'm Brian Carrier. This is a Cyber Triage release webinar. This is the second time we've done these. We started the last release as a way of doing a webinar to let people know what's in the latest versions. So we have people on the webinar who are customers or people who are just kind of interested in software. The first time I did it, a couple months ago, I basically went through the blog post that we have on kind of the 2 or 3 high-level features. Try something new this time. This time we're actually going to go through and run down, honestly, the release notes and do kind of a live demo to show you what's in there. This is actually much more risky, but it's going to actually allow you all to ask questions about things that are there that you didn't know about or you had questions about, even if they aren't new or not. So we'll just talk through some of the places that have changes so you know what they are, big or small. So first thing we're going to do, I want to point out that we do have the user manual is online, right? For those who don't know, so at docs.cybertriage.com is where you can find the user manual. Section 11 is the history, which has everything in the latest version. So you can see here that version 3.6 from last week, these are all of the things that were in there. This release is a bit different. We had a lot of things that were in this release that were kind of medium, small sized, a lot of user requests for things. So a bunch of these are pretty small. We won't spend too much time on them, but we'll skim through all of these as we go along here during this time. So I'm going to start off with one of the new features, which is ways of getting data in. So for those I haven't seen before, this is Cyber Triage, an incident view. I made an incident, preloaded some data in just to make this a little bit faster for everyone. Where's my cursor? But one new feature in 3.6 is when you add a new host, you have a new option to specify a local disk. So for those who haven't seen this before or didn't know all these options, these 3 are all about using our collection tool on a live running system, different ways of getting the collection tool there and data coming back. You can give us a disk image, memory image, we'll use volatility version 2. You can give us a cape output or logical files being a folder with files in there, at a Windows path and a system 32 path or a user folder path. And, our collection methods will skim through that and look for the hives and event logs and all the other kind of databases we care about. So new option, local disk, right? So to be perfectly 100% clear, what you're seeing here, this is the Cyber Triage UI that runs on your analysis system, right? So we have a different collection tool that you can get down here, the collection tool button, that gets you the executable that you want to run on that live running system. But sometimes the collection you have, maybe a disk image with BitLocker, and you have to use some other tool to decrypt that and analyze that image. And what you get is a mounted drive. So you get a G drive or an H drive or an E drive or whatever drive that it mounts as that you then want to analyze and run Cyber Triage on. So before, what you would do is you would go to disk image and you would plug in something like //dot/ E:, some kind of cryptish thing that if you know what it is, it's there, but it's not entirely obvious. The new version, you go to local disk, and this now gives you a pull down of what drive letters there are besides your C drive, right? You're not going to use this to analyze the current computer. You're doing this to analyze a mounted drive that you have mounted. So in this case, maybe we used a tool like OSF mount or Arsenal mount or something else, and we have a D drive. In this case, it's a VHD drive that I mounted. But you can plug that in, give it a host name, and it will go through and then kind of analyze that drive as before. So again, the functionality is always there. It just requires you to know to plug in something like // dot physical drive 1 or something. Now you can just choose in from the picker there. This does require UAC admin credentials for this. So you will get a prompt if you hit go here. It'll prompt you so that the collection tool can run on that with admin privileges and access all of these files on there. So that's one new feature. Any questions? Plug them in the little Q&A section and we'll circle back on those. Otherwise, everything else here is exactly the same as it was in past releases. Cape and logical files were added in the past 6 months for those who haven't been paying attention. There is a cape log. Well, while I'm just talking freely here, there's a cape log that we put out here about a month ago. So if you go to cybertriage.com, under the resources page, there's a new blog on using cape. and kind of the pros and cons of the Cape collection tool versus our collection tool. All right, so back at the incident dashboard view, I already brought in a data set. This is the eval data set here. So I already brought that in. Let's open that up. So this is the usual view, right? Data types over here on the left. This is the dashboard, giving you kind of a high-level summary on what bad items there are and what suspicious items there are from the scoring, and the timeline of what we know so far about the bad items on there. So some things that are new. So in the accounts tab, right? So the accounts tab over here shows you the OS accounts that are on that system or that were referenced on that system. This has been an evolution over the past few releases to focus more on showing you accounts that were referenced, but allowing you to filter those out. So that was, I think, 2 releases ago, we introduced this new interface, for OS accounts. What's in this new release is this notion of non-existent accounts. But since we haven't had these webinars before with us, let's dive in a bit more. So what you're going to see here in the accounts view are all of the OS accounts that have a reference. And by reference, I mean that we could be going through an event log and seeing a reference to an OS account or a destination for a remote desktop account, where on the destination system there is an account named Joe, and you'll see that here. There's no activity on the system, but we're showing it. We've created an account for it. So these filters here allow you to specify what kind of accounts you want to see. So by default, these 2 are checked, which is basically saying, show me the accounts that either had an interactive logon on the system, or were launching processes, so that they had some level of pretty good control, of the system that you're looking at. Second category is file or service access. What this means is that if the computer you're looking at is running a file share or a file server, you'll see accounts that show up with this one that may not have had interactive log on the system, but were able to, mount, whether it's the C, $sign or some other file share on there. They had access to data, but they couldn't actually launch things. And then this other one, no observed actions, is basically we saw a reference to it. We're letting you know it's there, but we don't think they actually did anything on this host. We just kind of know they exist. So by default, this is showing us 2 accounts, right? Kind of a local account named JDoe or a domain account named JDoe and the admin account. What's new in this version is this notion of non-existent. So non-existent accounts are from failed logons where the account doesn't exist, right? So you can see these with spray attacks and other kinds of things, or just basic typos, right? That you mistype your name, on there. Before, those were getting dropped. Now we're making accounts for them, but we don't want to muddy up the screen. If you have kind of an attack of a brute force attack, guessing names, spray attacks, whatever, this can get very overwhelming. So by default, they're hidden, but if you want to see them, you can check this off and you will now see them. This data set doesn't have those examples, but that is kind of a new feature in this release. Just kind of going through other things on here. System or virtual accounts are being hidden by default. If I uncheck that here, you'll see that we now see things like the service accounts or some SIDs that are on here. You may also see like font driver and other kind of accounts that are existing on many systems, but that you don't care about usually. They aren't of interest to you if you're looking at who is involved, with an attack. So by default, right, these are hidden off and these are hidden off just so you can focus on who is actually there on the system. If there's a bunch of accounts on here, you can say, hey, I just want to see who logged in or who activated in the past 30 days. You can do that here to kind of hone in on, reducing down a lot of data sets. These filters matter more honestly for domain controllers, where you may be focused on who actually had interactive system on this domain controller and ignore everyone else who just was accessing the file share. So again, feel free to plug in questions you have on there, but just kind of want to give an overview on how to use this panel. If you haven't used it before, or the questions there on what we added in. All right. Other things down here, these didn't change at all. Inbound logons hasn't changed. We did a bunch of work on that last release. There's 2 tabs here. One is the summary, trying to give you an overall view on kind of who is logging in, when and where. And this tab over here gives you the details on kind of the inbound logons. Outbound, there are some changes in this release. Outbound, there's now more event logs are being parsed to get more information on outbound logons. So that you should see some more outbound logon activity in there in the new release. So processes had a big change in this release. So the processes tab shows you currently now any concept of a process on that system, whether it was at the time of snapshot, if you ran our collection tool and we took a picture of kind of what processes were running at that time, and merging together historical data from things like user assist or prefetch or any of the other variety of locations that we get process data. So in past versions of Cyber Triage, there was two sections. There was processes, which was all about kind of that snapshot of the live running system. And there was another type we called program run, which was kind of the historical context for that. We're moving Cyber Triage more towards a continuous monitoring world, right? So that our collection tool is always running and getting data. You can import things like sysmon logs. So this concept of like a snapshot in time becomes much less relevant in that world. So this was step one of that. This is basically of, these were all processes at one point, even though they weren't at the time of capture, all the things in prefetch or user assist, they were processes in the past. So they're all now being kind of merged and stored together and displayed together. We also changed the UI to be a bit more of this kind of search UI. The old UI in Cyber Triage in 3.5, was of a tree hierarchy. It's like a tree table hierarchy where we knew the parents, we knew the children. As part of merging stuff together, right? We don't necessarily know all the parents anymore, so that UI doesn't work anymore. And honestly, that UI made it hard to kind of sort and filter if you wanted to look for certain things, because you had to know who the parent may or may not have been, for that process. So new UI world, it's more of the search interface. What this is going to do is basically search for processes that meet your criteria and group them so that you can kind of decide where to drill in on if you have dozens of executions of the same process that ran over and over and over again. So by default, we're going to group by unique executables and arguments. In this case, there's no arguments here in this data set, but we'll see it in a bit as we change some rules. We'll see them, but basically because arguments can change the behavior of the process, that becomes a unique grouping factor. So we'll go by that. We will, in this case, we're showing all, but if you want to say, hey, I want to know in the past 24 hours, what was running, you can just hone in on that. The basic idea here is that some places have a triage step of look at the currently running processes. It's kind of arbitrary, honestly, right? Because what's currently running now, there could be a process that finished 5 minutes ago. So the idea here is look at the past 24 hours of what ran, regardless of it was exactly when you did the collection, or a little bit before that. So you can pick your run date on there in terms of how close or far and how much data you want to pull in there. By default, our goal with this right now is to focus on allowing you to look for kind of the anomalous processes that we're running. So by default, we're going to score the processes that were scored as good. We're gonna hide those from you. So a process gets scored as good. Here, I'm gonna uncheck that so you can see what comes up. Right, these are files like command.exe or some other ones that the malware scanning from Reversing Labs and the 40+ engines came back saying, yeah, this is not malware, this is not malicious. Something like command could be used for malicious reasons, but the process itself isn't malicious executable. It could be used for malicious intent, but it's not malicious itself. So by default, we're going to hide the things that came back with a clean malware score that have kind of a trust certificate, and we'll show just those ones that have kind of a small window of time on that. So what this does is groups these together. They're sorted by default the last execution time, meaning that the most recent program that ran is at the top, on the theory that if you're triaging this system, something recently happened that was bad or suspicious at least. So you want to focus on kind of what most recently happened versus the stuff that happened 10 days ago. It could be relevant, but first focusing on kind of more the recent things first. So that's the default way. When you come in here, it's going to group things by executable arguments, hide the good stuff, and order by time, so you can kind of see roughly, big picture, what things are on here. If you want to kind of broaden your scope, you can change the time. You can kind of, maybe remove the scored as good, and that will again get you much more things on here that we're running even more sooner than that, but kind of maybe more false positive prone or less interesting, for you. There's of course living off land things here, but again, for your first pass, focusing more on kind of the things that are anomalous. When you do this, you will dive into, you can open each of these up and see more details. So in this use case, we have this Java performance tester program in our sample set. It's actually Mimikatz for those who have seen kind of a demo, of this before. And you can then kind of view the details, of that over here. And then there's others, you can view all of them down here. This arrow gets you back to showing all your search results. So basic idea here is come in this view, look at the anomalous things on here, and make some decisions on this is interesting, and then drive into all of the various details, of that. If at any point you want to decide that these things are bad, so if we decide, for example, that netstat is bad, we can of course go through here and score them, as bad or good with these, like we always could, before. You can also score all instances up here as well as at a group level. Other kind of new UI here as well. Some people like the tree structure, like we got rid of the tree table structure as part of this. If you go to this process tree now, this is our new tree interface, which is basically showing you that if you use our collection tool and you do have a snapshot of processes, this is the view you get. These are all kind of the root processes. So we can see here that, explorer.exe, and you can click on that. It's got 10 children, and it will show you these, 10 children that were running on that. You can click on this one and see the children. So what we're doing here is allowing you to start at the top and drill in. And at any given time, when you choose a process, like in this case, we chose min_tty, we see the parents and we see the children. You can click on any of them, see the details down below, for what that process is, what is it, a startup item, what's the user account associated, with the process, etc. But these trees can get very overwhelming, especially if you dive into the services tab, in structure and things. So main idea here is keep this small, keep this tight, by showing you the top level ones and you drilling in as you go along. If you love this picture, if you think this is an amazing picture of this rather arbitrary set of processes structure, you can go up here and say export as PNG, and this will allow you to export that out as a picture if you want that for a report or something else in your kind of sharing of information, as you will. So that is the new process things on here. Similarly as well, here I'm going to jump on min_tty again. We also brought the tree into the process tab. So there's now a tree tab over here on processes, and this is going to show you exact same thing up here. But the reason I bring this up is that in theory, right, you got to here because you found the process elsewhere, or maybe click on min_tty executable up top here from the file view or something else, and this would then kind of show you all of the processes involving that. And if we know the parent children, you can see that here as well. You may also notice that the execution history tab is gone. Execution history tab was one of the ones down here that was basically the program run data. So because everything has now been merged together, then it's one tab now. Let me see if I can, let me go to, let's see, Sigwin bin mtty. I am now going to go fully off the rails here and actually go fully on here of navigating to that. And so in this case now, this is the example now. So execution history and process are now merged together. So in this case, we kind of navigated to the min_tty exe file, and so we can see here all the processes that we know associated with that. So we can see here there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever that is, 10 executions of min_tty, and for each of these, there's details on the side. So you can see here that we don't see the tree information for some of these, likely because these came from like prefetch or user assist or one of the other kind of files that we know it ran at that time. But at least for this one, we see the tree tab is enabled there, and that's because this was running at the time of execution. So this is probably the one we actually saw before. Here's another one, same basic structure. So yeah, we just had kind of two running versions, of that one. So this is the basic rundown as well of kind of execution history and process are now merged together. All right, let me go back to the actual history log here to kind of review what else we should be talking about. So I mentioned the process view in the merging of all those things. So we kind of covered all of that. Oh yeah, we're also recording now which processes had elevated privileges. So you'll see that getting flagged. OS accounts we already kind of talked about. We used to get, I'm gonna say used to because we haven't addressed, but questions about, we used to call certain accounts inferred. You can see that here. We've now merged that with the concept of unknown. Inferred was the references, where we saw an account reference somewhere, so we infer that the account exists, but we didn't quite know. So there's always question about what that meant. So that has now been retermed to be unknown, just as kind of an FYI. Same basic process there. User logins, I mentioned before that there's now more 4648 event logs for outbound logons. We're now collecting more third-party remote logon apps. So as you may know, in the last release, we're focusing more on looking for lateral movement and the UIs for remote logons, with a focus on like the Windows remote logon with these like 4648 events. We're also now parsing and bringing back more third-party application logs on there, but not necessarily parsing them, but at least they're there as source files, and you can grab them out and parse them yourselves, if you want to. OS configuration. So for those who don't know, the OS configuration section is over here. This gives you a bunch of information about kind of settings on the system, given the attacker may change OS settings to make their attacks and detection kind of easier or detection harder. This is an eval kind of demo data set on here, which doesn't have basically everything that we normally would collect. But one thing that we do now record, but not in this sample data set yet, is things like now event log size. So one technique that attackers can use to reduce there being event logs of their attack is to squash the max event log size down to like 2K or some 5K or some small size that will quickly rotate over. So we're now bringing back the log sizes and flagging if they're too small, and a bunch of other things around there that would be kind of like changing of audit settings that would prevent there being from logs on there. Let's see what else we have. We mentioned the local drive option that's on there. Trigger tasks, we're now parsing the event log that we weren't before to do that for also service creation. We've always been parsing registry for what service is there. We're now doing more with the event log to also look for services there in case they were kind of installed and removed and no longer there at the time of collection. So we'll now see trigger tasks that are created based off of that being a service. PC exec will get flagged if that was on there, just as kind of a tool that has many legit uses, but also some malicious uses. So that will get flagged now if PS exec was being used as a service. There's more files being downloaded. There's not really much to see here in the demo data set for this, but we've always been doing some level of downloading or collecting downloaded files. We're now kind of broadening that based off of some of the attack trends that have been happening more recently, right, in different ways of phishing and targeting and ISO files and LNK files and OneNote and all these various things. So a couple of themes here, right? One is that we're broadening where we're looking for downloaded files. So in the last versions, we were focused on the download folder. Now we care less about location. It's more about the zone identifier alternate data stream, which is Windows' way of tracking what files were copied in and downloaded from there. So we're looking for those identifiers and collecting them, even if we can't find other references to how they got there. That's a trigger for us to make sure we get that content. We're also bringing in more content of more types, LNK files, ISO files. We don't want to bring in too much downloaded stuff, honestly. There's a lot of essentially sensitive data that may come with that, and just a bunch of like big noise that may come with that, or big files that aren't useful. So our collection method tries to be somewhat targeted on what we think is going to be relevant for downloaded files. So we'll pull back metadata of pretty much every downloaded thing, but we don't bring back all content for things. So that the list of file types is expanded to allow us to bring more in, and there's a date range on there, so that if you have a Linux ISO or some ISO from 2 years ago in your downloads folder, we're not going to bring that back. But if you have an ISO file from 2 months ago, right, other characteristics, maybe that will come back, as well. So there's some work on the download section. Again, if you have questions on what our specific rules are, feel free to drop those in. Search panel. Search panel didn't change at all. We just kind of changed the UI a bit to make it a bit more obvious about what it does. So down here, the lower left, there's a search panel. It used to have like a little search bar up here that you could search. That caused some confusion because pretty much every one of our UIs has a search box up here. And this search box here is just searching kind of what's in view of the table. So you can see here, it says search the table rows. This search was a bit confusing because it was also a search box up top, but this is basically searching the entire host. So we changed this a little bit to make this more clear. This is now moved down into the middle here, and we have text here to make it more clear of what you can put in here. So if you've got a file hash, SHA-256 or SHA-1, whatever, you can plug that in. We will search for instances of that file hash. If you have a name or other kind of values you're looking for, you can put that in there, and we'll do there. The big caveat, right, which we weren't doing and we still aren't doing, this is not a full text search, right? So this is not indexing every bit and byte and text and phrase from inside of files and unallocated space and all that kind of stuff. This is really just the metadata, file names, paths, maybe event log entries, etc., but not kind of full content search. We will be here doing more extraction from executables. This has been kind of a request of, hey, I really want to find out if an IP address or a host name or something else was in an executable. So we are looking at doing some work to do some strings extraction and indicator extraction from executables to at least index that, so you can do that kind of searching and find executables even without kind of doing a full text extraction from all files. So again, same functionality, just kind of different UI. If you guys have questions on what the scope of our search, now's time to plug them in. So we're getting a few questions here. Let me finish up here, and then we'll kind of dive into questions here, since the questions are a bit historical at this point. Reports, there's a couple of new reports that are on there. Let me jump back. So on the dashboard, there's a report section here. There's a pull down here for what reports you can issue. There's always been HTML and JSON and JSON line. There's 3 new ones in this release, and we renamed these just to make them all more clear as we're getting more report formats. But there's a new one, which is bad files in a zip. So this is basically any file that got scored as bad, usually from the malware scanning, but could be from Yara or whatever you're doing. These will get put into a zip file with the usual kind of password of infected, for the zip file password. But this gives you one zip file with all the bad files in there, so you can then share that or do whatever sandboxing or whatever kind of analysis you want to do as part of that. We'll come back to sandboxing in a second to make sure you're all aware of it. Another feature we added over the summer or the early fall that you may not know about. But on the report section, you can also do an export of all file SHA-256 hashes as a text file. So this is basically a CSV file, 1 row, per hash file. This is, again, just a way of, like, if you have other systems that you want to import into a SIM or enrich with something else, this gives you all those hashes you can do your own analysis and lookup with. It's the same thing as all IP addresses. If you have some other downstream systems and you want to get all IPs out of there, this gives you a CSV or 1 IP per line view of that. One kind of caveat here, as part of our analysis, we resolve host names to IP addresses at the time of collection. It may be a bad mapping, based on that IP and host name have changed over time. But we want to give you some level on like a notion of what host name maps to an IP address. So those IPs are shown in this list. So this list is going to show you, the actual IPs that were there, as well as ones that we resolved to during kind of the import, and analysis process. So those are 3 new reports on there. You just pick them, hit go, and they will, prompt you for a folder to save them to. I mentioned that before. There was a question that to make sure you're all aware of. So I'll go to bad items. I can probably do it from here, I think. Does this work? Yeah. So early fall, we integrated in the Recorded Future sandbox. So Recorded Future is a threat intelligence company. They bought a company called Hatching, which is a sandboxing service. So you can get free access to that from within Cyber Triage. So you can right click on that. You can say submit to Recorded Future Sandbox. This gives you kind of the disclosure on the fact that the results you have from this will become part of the Recorded Future, kind of threat intelligence feed. So just that right, this is kind of, will be shared and be available to other people. So depending on your sensitivity level in terms of, this getting out, right, that's kind of there. So you can hit yes. We'll say you want to upload it. That's getting uploaded. What's going to happen is that's getting sent up to Recorded Future. They're going to do a sandbox analysis of this, and then you can then get a report afterwards on what it did. It runs for 2 minutes by default. It runs in a sandbox and get the results. So it's 1:33 right now. We'll do some other stuff, and we'll check back in on this in a couple minutes, and I'll show you the report for that. All right, what else did we do here? So collection details. So the collection details panel we added in the last release, I think, or 2 releases ago, down here in the lower left. This gives you a whole bunch of information on what was collected. As I mentioned, this demo eval data that I have loaded doesn't actually have all of the information populated here. I realized that before this call. So I pulled up this screenshot here from the user manual, of that. And this is what you would see on a more current collection, where it has, basically all of the source files. So we consider source files to be registry hives, event logs, LNK files, databases, etc., that we parse and extract artifacts out from. So what you would see here is this kind of path here, and this shows you all of those. This button here, export all files, will allow you to get all of the hives and event logs out of there. What's new now in 3.6 is that things that we attempted to collect but didn't find are now being reported. So this honestly came out of some discussions we had with some customers a while back. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this PowerShell, log file, this PowerShell config file. You didn't collect it. Is that because you didn't look for it, or is that because it wasn't there? So now you'll see a bunch of these entries here, like in this case, it's a PowerShell entry here, that basically saying we looked for something like this and it wasn't found. So just to be clear, so whether or not it's not there because we didn't look for it or because it wasn't found. So this is that new panel over there. Other things that we are looking for, we're starting to flag more IP addresses and host names if they're things for like Mega or other places that are being commonly used by attackers for data exfiltration. So kind of like a mini bad list. We talked a while ago about actually integrating in host-based threat intelligence. We're going to start looking into finding a service that can provide that, like we have for reversing labs for file intelligence. But in the meantime, right now, there's there's some obvious candidates we should just be putting in there to make sure you're aware of, right, that they're being used, there's traffic to them. Other kind of examples of stuff on here, the host information, this is also not in this data set, but if you go to the dashboard now, there's a new entry here on mounted drives. This will show you if, for example, there's an E drive or an F drive or whatever, which may have been an ISO file or something else, on there, that those are now being shown as well. So those are all new things that are not necessarily in this data set, but you can look for your investigations. So one of the questions I have here, so again, that's kind of the main rundown. I'll give a couple more minutes for the recorded future stuff here. Actually, it's been 4 minutes. That should be more than enough time. So we're going to go to online file reputation, the details button to get that. So we're going to click on this. We go to the recorded feature sandbox results. Here's the file we uploaded. And basically this came back with this information here on it made that and basically had no malicious behavior detected for that, and it was finished. So depending on what it does, that was probably a bad example to upload, honestly. This is the challenges of live demos here on this. If it made a network connection, if it launched and made a network connection, kind of back to somewhere else, that would be shown here. If it created files, made some config files, unpacked some things, put them in, you'd see those here, extracted files, etc. So if its behavior, ran through there, then you would see these things getting run, as part of that. So you can find that now as part of that. It's not a general kind of automatic upload. We're talking about doing that as part of any suspicious item that runs to automatically upload the suspicious ones, but right now it is that manual right click and launch. So back to the question. The question here was more about was about the report formats and diving into some of these other report formats and what they are. So one here is the all items in JSON. This is basically all of the collected items, whether they're bad or suspicious, in a JSON structure. We originally made this, full disclosure, for a Splunk integration. So we have a Splunk module that allows you to import this data and put them into the Splunk data set. That was the main motivation for this. We haven't actually dealt with this in a while. I was having a discussion last week with one of our customers who was looking for some more information to be in here. So we're gonna crack that open here pretty soon. So if you have interest in kind of getting more data out of Cyber Triage in a JSON-y structure or whatever, some structured format, please let us know, and we can include you in those discussions to map out kind of what you're looking for, in that. The all items in JSON line is basically a time sketch import. So if you're a time sketch user and you want to have all of our collected data in there, that's this format. And the CSV one is basically kind of a timelining item as well, but any item with a timestamp in there. Now, some things aren't going to be in there, right? So some things like user accounts, where there isn't really necessarily, an entry for every one of their, besides the creation date, isn't as easy to find, if you will, in there. This is much more of a sequence-based, timestamp entry, on there. So that was one question. Second question here was around the logons. There's a question on like the summary panels that were on here. So this data set's actually not very good, to be honest, with the logons, but to focus on logons, but just to kind of give you a high level view of what these panels are. So this panel is basically saying, there's 440 logon sessions, both local and remote, and what the date range is from the log files, which ones were suspicious, what there were for kind of failed ones. The histogram is kind of showing you for inbound, like what are the combinations of user and remote hosts. The current theory, of this is that, if some bad guy started coming in last month, then you would see, some entries over here, right towards the end of the collection, when the collection happened here on when those bad things actually kind of were. This data is basically all about kind of new interactive ones. So this data set doesn't have inbound malicious logins, which is why this data is kind of boring, honestly. But if you did have a host that had inbound lateral movement, here, this section is saying, hey, what users are coming in for the first time in the past 45 days that we had never seen before? And those get flagged because those could be compromised accounts that are just starting to come in. This one is more of, all right, fine, this user has come in for a while, but now they're coming in from a different host, right? They usually don't come in here. That's kind of suspicious. Flag what the new hosts are for that existing user. And then network logons are, regardless of who they are and what they are, what kind of network logons are they? And this is where you see things like psexec and PowerShell remote and WMI, et cetera, will show up as these. And so this is just kind of interesting because there usually aren't many of those, on a system unless there's like IT doing some stuff with there. So we just kind of show all of those with that. So that's kind of a summary of what these panels were. These are all from the last release. If at any point though you want to see all the details, so if you want to say, hey, the goal here is like give you a summary of things. If you want to see all users, you can then click on these buttons and they bring you to that kind of search panel to show all of them. All right, another question here about exporting the recorded future sandbox analysis. That's a good question. I don't think we do, honestly. That's a legit question. I'm gonna write that down as a feature that we can to allow more for that. Either as kind of the raw data, or kind of our summary view. There's a lot of really cool stuff with the recorded feature. To take a little pause here, it says in a brand spanking new feature. We just haven't talked about it much. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Actually, there's like a video actually that recorded feature provides of like the video of the thing running and showing you kind of the desktop, as it launches and what it does. We haven't integrated that in. The real goal here, honestly, was like, let's do a basic integration, see this interest in this, and then kind of go from there. So we're actually now at the point where we're trying to figure out kind of phase 2, of that integration. So, and any ways or ideas that you all have of how we integrate this data in would be great to hear. Because one thing we've been talking about is like, for example, on some systems, this will show what files were accessed, for example. And so it could be possible to then kind of allow you to navigate from here, back in to see those files and the content and kind of provide that kind of level of integration here on looking at the results to see if they are on the current system as well. All right, that's all the questions we have right now. Would love to hear you guys' feedback on this. This was kind of a useful, again, as mentioned before, the first time we did this, it was like a slide deck running through a PowerPoint, of kind of the blog. If those haven't seen the blog, there's the blog on our website that kind of dives into the processes, for example, and kind of context on that. If this was useful for you as well, just to kind of dive in and kind of see more of all these things. Let me know as well what your thoughts are with that. But while we're waiting for a last minute check here on questions, let me just verify that we went through kind of all these things. There were a couple of bugs that were fixed as well. Different event log parser for disk images. That's much faster. Using this one by the this Omer Benjamin Ram. I just butchered that name. I apologize. For event log parser. I think we covered everything else on here. So. Great. Yeah, so anything else, feel free to reach out. We're always here at support at cybertriage.com. Bob and Chris would love to answer your questions. You may hear from Austin at various times on looking and checking in to see how things are. But yeah, thanks for attending. And if you have any questions or feature requests, let us know. We are constantly prioritizing kind of our requests based off of what we're getting for requests. So appreciate it, and thanks much.